There is a specific kind of grief that nobody tells you about, not the grief of losing someone. Not the grief of something ending, the grief of realizing slowly and then all at once. That's something you thought. You had something you believed was yours certainly as your own name was never quite what you believed it was. I have been grieving that particular thing for most of my adult life, and it was not until I was 33 years old, sitting across from my mother at her kitchen table on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, that I finally stopped pretending it was fine and said the true thing out loud. What happened after I said it, what my mother did, what my father did, what my brother did, and what I understood about all three of them in the months that followed is the story I want to tell you today. But before I tell you what happened at that kitchen table, I need to take you back. All the way back. Because this story has roots that go deeper than one conversation on one Wednesday afternoon. And if I do not show you the roots, you will not fully understand what it costs to finally say the true thing. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and drop your country and local time in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you all the way back to the beginning. My name is Elena Vasquez. I am 35 years old. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, the older of two children, in a family that was warm and loud and full of the specific energy of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. My father's name is Eduardo. He was an electrician for 31 years. My mother's name is Maria. She ran a small alterations business out of our home for as long as I can remember, measuring and pinning and hemming in the back room while we did homework at the kitchen table, and the smell of whatever she had been cooking for dinner drifted through the house. My brother's name is Marco. He is 4 years younger than me. I want to tell you what Marco was like as a child because I think it matters to understanding what the family became around him. Marco was the kind of child who arrived in every room with an immediate gravitational pull. He was funny from the time he could form sentences, genuinely funny, with the timing and the instinct of someone who understands what makes people laugh before they are old enough to analyze it. He was beautiful in the way of someone who does not know they are beautiful and therefore wears it without self-consciousness. He was warm and tactile and easy in the specific way of a child who has never had a reason to be guarded. He was also, and I say this not to diminish him but to complete the picture, the kind of child who found effort difficult. Not intellectually. He was bright, but the sustained application of effort towards something that did not immediately reward him, that was hard for Marco. It always had been. My parents understood this about him, and they responded to it the way some parents respond to a child they perceive as fragile, not by helping him build the capacity to sustain effort, but by removing the consequences of not sustaining it. They did this so completely and so naturally that I do not think they ever recognized it as a pattern. They were loving Marco. That was all they understood themselves to be doing. What they were also doing without knowing it, without intending it, was building a set of conditions that would shape the next 30 years of all our lives. I was a different kind of child than Marco. I was the kind who applied effort as a matter of course, not because I was more disciplined by nature, but because I had understood very early that effort was the mechanism by which things happened. You worked. Things happened. You did not work. Things did not happen. This seemed to me so straightforward as to barely require examination. I was also the kind of child who did not require much management. I finished my homework without being reminded. I organized my own schedule. I handled problems that arose in my own life without bringing them to my parents unless they were genuinely beyond me. I was in the specific language that adults use without fully understanding what they are communicating. Low-maintenance. Low-maintenance children are a particular kind of invisible. Not unloved. Not overlooked in any dramatic sense, but operating in a specific frequency that does not trigger the parental attention that louder frequencies do. The child who is fine does not need the same level of response as the child who is struggling. Marco struggled with things, often, and the family organized around each struggle. The way water organizes around a stone, automatically, completely, without anyone deciding it should. When Marco failed his sophomore year of high school, my parents hired 3 tutors and rearranged the family schedule for 6 months to support his recovery. When I had a difficult semester in my freshman year of high school, I was told I was capable and I would figure it out. I did figure it out, alone, and nobody ever knew it had been difficult because the figuring out happened invisibly when Marco wanted to play baseball. My father built a practice area in the backyard and spent 2 evenings a week for 3 years coaching him. I ran track for 4 years. My parents attended the meets when they could, which was not always, and cheered when I placed, which I did often. When Marco decided at 22 that he wanted to start a landscaping business, my parents gave him $12,000 in startup capital. When I started a small tutoring business at 23, I was told it was a nice idea and to let them know how it went. None of these individual things, taken separately, amounts to a case. I want to be honest about that. The tutors, the backyard practice area, the $12,000, each of these has an explanation that does not require partiality. Marco needed the tutors. My father loved baseball and wanted to share it. Marco had an opportunity that the money could help. The pattern is only visible when you look at all of it together. When you total the investments and the attention, and the time and the specific quality of parental presence across 25 years of 2 children being raised in the same house, I did that accounting, quietly and privately, for a very long time before I ever said anything about it. I left San Antonio at 22. University in Austin, then a graduate degree in education policy, then a position at a nonprofit in Chicago working on literacy programs in underserved schools. I built a life there that was genuinely mine, good work, close friends, a small apartment I loved, and the specific satisfaction of someone who has made something of themselves. On their own terms, I came back to San Antonio for holidays. I called my parents every Sunday. I was a good daughter in all the visible ways, and most of the invisible ones. I was also, for the entire decade between 22 and 32, carrying something that I had never put down. Not anger. I want to be precise about this because anger is too simple a word for what it was. It was something more layered than anger. It was the specific experience of loving people who loved you back and also understanding that their love for you and their love for your brother were calibrated differently, and not knowing what to do with that understanding. Because the people doing the calibrating were good people who did not know they were doing it. You cannot be angry at people for things they do not know they are doing, but you can grieve them quietly over a very long time. I have been grieving for 10 years. When I went back to San Antonio for my mother's 61st birthday, the trip was supposed to be 5 days. A birthday dinner, some time with family, the ordinary rhythms of a visit home. On the 3rd day, Marco called my parents in a panic. The landscaping business, which had been operating for 8 years on an uneven trajectory of occasional success and frequent rescue, was in serious trouble. A large commercial contract had fallen through. He owed 2 months of payroll to 3 employees. He needed $25,000 immediately, or the business would not survive the month. I was in the living room when the call came. I heard my mother's side of the conversation. I watched her face. I knew before she said anything what was going to happen. My parents went to their bedroom. They spoke privately for 40 minutes. When they came out, my father looked at me with the specific expression of someone about to say something they know is complicated and have decided to say anyway. He said, "We are going to help Marco. We have some savings and we are going to use them. I wanted you to know." I looked at my father. I thought about the $12,000 at 22, about the additional loans that had been quietly forgiven over the years, about the specific pattern of rescue that had followed Marco's business. Through 8 years of operation, I thought about the tutoring business I had started at 23 and grown into a regional literacy consulting practice by 30 without a single dollar from my parents. I thought about the emergency fund I had built myself after the organization. I worked for lost a major grant and I had gone 3 months on savings alone. I thought about all of it. And then I said something I had never said before. I said, "Dad, can we talk? The 3 of us. Can we sit down and talk before you decide anything?" My father looked at me for a moment. Then he said yes. My mother came out of the kitchen. The 3 of us sat at the kitchen table and I said the true thing. I want to tell you how I said it because I think the how matters as much as the what. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry, not immediately. I did not compile a list of grievances or deliver a prepared statement. I simply started talking the way you talk when you've been holding something for 10 years. and have finally decided that the holding has cost more than the saying, I said. I need to tell you something that I've been not telling you for a very long time. And I need you to hear it as coming from someone who loves you. Not as an attack. Not as an ultimatum. Just as the truth. My mother folded her hands on the table. My father was very still, I said. I've spent 32 years being the child who did not need anything. The one who figured it out. The one who was fine. And I was fine. I did figure it out. Everything I have I built myself, and I am proud of that, and I would not trade the building of it. I paused. But I need to tell you what it was like to build it while watching Marco be caught every time he fell. What it was like to handle my own crises in silence while his were handled as family emergencies. What it was like to watch $12,000 go to a business idea at 22 and be told that my idea was nice and they hoped it went well. My mother's hands tightened slightly on the table. I am not asking you to take back anything you gave him, I said. I am not asking you to give me money. I have money. I do not need money. What I'm asking, what I have needed for 30 years and have never been able to say, is for you to understand that what you gave Marco was not just financial. It was the message that his dreams were worth investing in. That when he struggled, someone would come. That he was worth the organized effort of the entire family. I stopped. The kitchen was completely silent. I needed to feel that too, I said. And I did not. And I have carried that without ever telling you. Because you are good people who never intended. And I did not know how to say it without sounding like I was. Accusing you of something you did not know. You were doing. My voice broke on the last sentence. Just slightly. Just enough. My mother's eyes were wet. My father was looking at the table. We did. My father spoke first. He did not speak immediately. He sat with what I had said for a long time, long enough that I wondered if I had made a mistake. If I had said something that would damage things rather than open them. Then he looked up. And his face was doing something I had not seen from my father before. Not guilt exactly, something more fundamental than guilt. The specific expression of a person who has just understood that they have been making a mistake for a very long time and the understanding of it has arrived all at once rather than gradually. He said. Elena, I said. Dad. I did not see it, he said. I want you to know that I'm not saying that as an excuse. I'm saying it because I need you to know that I was not choosing to see Marco over you. I was responding to what was in front of me. And what was in front of me was always Marco needing something. And you were always fine. I know, I said. But you were telling me you were fine, he said slowly. And I was believing you. And I should have looked more carefully. I should have asked. He stopped. I should have asked, he said again. More quietly, I nodded. My mother reached across the table. She took my hand with both of hers. The way she used to hold my hand when I was small, and something had frightened me completely with both hands, the specific grip of someone who is not letting go. She said, My Elena, I am so sorry. I am so deeply sorry. I could not speak for a moment. Then I said, I know you are. I know you did not mean it. That is why I've been carrying it for so long instead of saying it. Because how do you tell people who love you that the love has been landing differently than they thought? You say it, my mother said. The way you just did. You say it and you let them know. She was crying. My father was crying. The specific, private, unperformed crying of two people who have just understood something about themselves that they cannot. And understand, I was crying too. We sat at that kitchen table and we cried together, and it was the most honest thing our family had ever done. The conversation about Marco, about whether to give him the $25,000 happened the following day. Not at the kitchen table. In the living room. With Marco present, because my parents had called him and asked him to come. I was there because my parents had asked me to be. I had not requested it. They had asked. Marco walked in not knowing what the conversation was going to be. He looked at the three of us, at something in the room's atmosphere, and something in his face became careful. My father told him that he and my mother had been talking. That they wanted to help him, but that they also wanted to have a different kind of conversation than they usually had when he needed help. He said, Marco, we love you. We have always loved you. And we have shown that love in a way that has not always served you well. We have caught you every time you have fallen for 8 years, and I am not sure that catching you has helped you learn to land. Marco was very still. My father said, we are going to give you some of what you need. Not all of it. Because we think that solving all of it for you has been part of the problem. And because there is something else we need to tell you. He looked at me. Then he told Marco what I had said at the kitchen table, not everything. The essential shape of it. The decades of imbalance. The invisible ways it had accumulated. What it had meant to be the child who was always fine. Marco listened. He did not react immediately. He sat with it the way my father had sat with it, long enough that I was not sure what was coming. Then he looked at me. He said, Elena, I did not know. I know, I said. I knew they helped me more. But I thought it was because I needed it more. Not because. He stopped. Not because it meant something different about what they thought of us. It was not intentional, I said. From them or from you. The pattern was not intentional, but it happened, he said. Yes, I said. It happened. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I want to fix this. I do not know how, but I want to. I looked at my younger brother. At the 40-year-old version of the child who had arrived in every room with an immediate gravitational pull. Who had always been caught and who had learned through being always caught. To expect the catching, I felt something soften in a place that had been hard for a very long time. I said, start by figuring out what you can solve yourself. Then we will talk about the rest. The months after that visit were not simple. Real things are not simple. The conversation at the kitchen table opened something, and the opening was necessary and right, and also hard in the way that necessary right things often are. My parents called me more. Not the checking in calls, real calls. My mother called on a Tuesday afternoon to tell me about a difficult conversation she had had with a neighbor and to ask my advice. My father called one evening just to talk about a book he was reading. These were not the calls we had exchanged for years. They were different in the specific way of something that has been adjusted to become more true. My mother flew to Chicago in March, just her and me. 4 days, we walked along the lake and ate at the restaurant near my apartment that I had always wanted to take her to, and talked in a way we had not talked in 32 years of being mother and daughter. On the last evening she said, I keep thinking about what you said. About how do you tell people who love you that the love has been landing differently than they thought? I said, it landed fine in the end. She shook her head. It landed better once you said something. But it should not have taken 32 years. That is what I keep thinking about. 32 years you carried it because you did not know how to say it and I did not know to ask. I thought about that. I think we were both waiting for someone to go first. I said, you went first, she said. Yes. I said, thank you, she said, simply, for going first. I held my mother's hand across that restaurant table and thought about all the years before that moment and about what it had cost to arrive there and about what it meant to finally be there. It meant everything. Not because the years before it were erased. They were not erased. The imbalance had been real and its effects had been real, and I had carried them for a long time, and that carrying had shaped me in ways I was still understanding, but the carrying was lighter now. Because someone else finally knew about it. Because I put it down on that kitchen table and let my parents pick it up, and the weight of it was shared in a way it had not been shared before. And sometimes, most of the time, that is what we actually need. Not the fixing of the past. Not the undoing of what happened, just someone who knows. Who finally, completely knows. Marco applied for a small business loan in February. He did not take the full $25,000 from my parents. He took $15,000 and covered the rest himself. Through the loan and through renegotiating the failed contract in a way that recovered partial payment. He called me one evening in April, not to talk about the business. Just to talk. We had not simply talked without agenda, without occasion. In years. We talked for 2 hours. He told me things about his childhood I had not known. Things he had felt and not said. Pressures he had experienced that I had not seen from my position as the capable older sister who figured things out. I told him things he had not known. The tutoring business. The 3 months on savings alone. The specific experience of being the one who was always fine and how fine and invisible had lived for a long time. Very close together in the same body. He was quiet for a long time after I told him that. Then he said, "We were raised in the same house and I did not know you." "I know," I said. "I want to know you," he said. "The actual you. Not the one who is always fine." "She's the same person," I said. "She just needed someone to ask." "I'm asking," he said. "I know," I said. "Keep asking." He has kept asking. Every week he calls. Sometimes twice. He asks about my work and my friends and the small details of my daily life with the specific curiosity of someone making up for lost time. He tells me about the business and about the things he is learning about himself through the effort of building it more carefully than he built it before. We are becoming something we were never quite allowed to be when we were children, siblings who know each other. I did not know that was possible. I am very glad I was wrong. There is something I think about sometimes when I am walking along the lake near my apartment in the early mornings. The city still quiet. The light on the water doing the specific thing it does in the hour before the day fully begins. I think about the version of me who could have stayed quiet at that kitchen table, who could have heard my father's announcement about the $25,000 and nodded, and said nothing and driven to the airport 2 days later and returned to Chicago and resumed the carrying. That version of me exists. She spent 32 years existing and she was fine. She figured everything out. She built everything herself. She carried what she carried without complaint. And she was genuinely proud of what the carrying had produced, but she was also tired. In a way that she had stopped noticing because tired had become the baseline and she had forgotten what not tired felt like. And less tired now. Not because everything is resolved. Some things are ongoing. The calibration of a family is not corrected in one kitchen table conversation or one 4-day visit to Chicago or one 2-hour phone call. It is corrected slowly, imperfectly, through the accumulated weight of different choices made differently over time, but the direction is different now. And direction is everything. When you have been walking in the wrong direction for 32 years and you stop and you turn, the distance you still have to cover does not disappear, but it stops growing. It starts getting smaller, one step at a time, before you go. I want to ask you something real. Have you ever been the one who was always fine? Have you ever carried something quietly for so long that the carrying became invisible even to yourself? Have you ever loved people who loved you back and also understood that the love was landing differently than they intended and not known what to do with that understanding? And have you ever finally, after too long, said the true thing? Drop the word table in the comments if this story reached something real in you, and if you are new here, subscribe. Every single day I share a new story about family, about truth, and about the people who finally stopped carrying alone and let someone else into the weight of it. I will see you in the next one, Kayla's Dark Truth.